On a snowy Saturday in February, I opened my laptop for an interview with one of my favorite bands. The conversation that followed was heartfelt, honest, and at times emotional. I sat down with members of the original Yonder Mountain String Band, Adam Agela, Ben Kaufman, and Dave Johnston, to discuss the early years of the band and to celebrate 25 years since the release of their debut album, Elevation. As well, the band announced a couple of very special upcoming releases. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Yonder Mountain String Band. I want to start by thanking you guys for doing this. This is very meaningful to me. I've been listening to your music for 2 decades plus, and it holds a special place in my heart. So being able to sit down with the three of you means a lot to me.
Cool, man.
Thanks.
Glad we could do it. Yeah, when you asked me, I'm like, I'm going to see if those guys can do it. I'm sure we all remember things a little bit different. So I think having all three of us will be a more fully formed memory or lack thereof, depending on the confusion.
Good. We're about to jump back. So let's look back 26 years ago to when Yonder Mountain String Band took shape. What drew you all to Nederland and Boulder, Colorado, and what were those towns like in the late 90s?
Ben, why don't you go first, since you were the first to arrive to this lovely state?
Yeah, in the mid 90s, I was going to school in New York City, going to film school, which I thought for a minute that's what I wanted to do. And I was not doing well there. New York City, I didn't resonate with the city. I was challenged by it in a lot of ways. I didn't feel good. And I didn't like my choice of pursuing film school. And so, but I did have a couple of friends that I made there, and we would always go out to see music. So I was sort of like in my headspace at this time is I don't like New York City. I don't know what to do about it. I kind of feel trapped. I kind of feel lost. And my buddy's like, let's go down to this club called the Wetlands, which doesn't exist anymore. And let's go see this band called Colonel Bruce Hampton and the Aquarium Rescue Unit. So we did, but he said, oh, we got to get there early because there's a band from Colorado that I want to see. So we did. And that band was Leftover Salmon. And watching them play, I just started to get hip to like the sounds of bluegrass, but in a very backwards way, through like Bela Fleck's, and the Fleck tones. So at the sound of the banjo, or Fish playing bluegrass tunes. And Salmon came out and they were doing their own thing, which was not exactly bluegrass, but kind of, has parts of bluegrass in it. But just their energy. And it really affected me in a very powerful way. And I remember thinking to myself, like, where are they from? What is it like to live in a place where that thing, that sound, that spirit could be born? Because that's what I feel like I need. And so I found out that was Colorado, and then specifically like the Front Range of Colorado, and Boulder was an easy choice for me. So I, making a long story short-ish, I transferred schools to the University of Colorado in Boulder, and basically just wasted a bunch of time and a little bit of money having a convenient, safe place to just be and live and explore, while I reconnected with the idea that maybe my life's path was supposed to be a musical one. And so that's how I ended up in Boulder. Then the second part of your question, what were the towns like then? Well, Boulder seemed a lot smaller and like emptier. Like summer times it would empty out, and it was, I don't know, the vibe was so much different. Less, there's always money in Boulder, but less money and more hippies and more people that seemed like me, and less corporate. It was way more cool. And Nederland was this, I'm just like, this is where the outlaws live. Like this is up and away from even like if you thought Boulder, even at the time, like if you even had the thought, like Boulder's a little square, man. Like Nederland was the Wild West to me. It had a music venue up there that I loved, and I had friends. I had a friend or two that were up there, but mostly it was a place to go play music, and that's how I met Jeff. And pretty soon after that, Dave and Adam. And Nederland was just like, I knew in the same way that I knew I needed to leave New York City, and I found Colorado and I found Boulder, and that was my answer at that time. Then similarly, I realized I wanted to be in Nederland. Like I needed to get out of Boulder and go to Nederland. And that was a couple years later, but it was a similar sort of understanding, internal, mental, emotional understanding.
What was the venue up there?
The Acoustic Coffee House, the Acoustic Cafe, run by Tom Plant, who went on to be a state representative. But he and his wife, Dawn, were wonderful music supporters and fans and wonderful people. And they hired my weird little, crappy little bluegrass band preceding Yonder, that they gave me a gig, and Jeff was in the audience. And he came up afterwards and handed me his number written on a little scrap of paper. And he looked like he weighed 100 pounds and had long hair, and this was goofy looking. And he's like, I play mandolin, and my name's Jeff, and my buddy's moving to town, and he plays banjo, and you should come up. We should play music together. And it took me
what month that was?
Gosh, I mean, I don't.
It was 98 though.
It was 98, maybe in the winter of 98.
It would have to have been the spring, because I moved there in April 98.
Yeah, so you were the way he described it, I remember him saying that you were about to move out.
Sure.
So right around then. But I remember, like, I don't know, I had like a bunch of different musical projects going on, and at the time Jeff was just some dude who came up to me after a show. And I'm like, okay, well, sure. But I kept his number, and we got in touch eventually. And then I came up and met Dave and Adam at a pick at the Verve, which was another venue that had music. Dave and Jeff, I think you guys started that pick.
We did.
And I'm very grateful for that, because that was literally where Yonder was born.
I moved, around when Ben's talking, that time frame, I moved to Nederland about 6-7 months prior. So end of October 97. I was living in California at the time, working for the Forest Service about an hour south of Lake Tahoe. And I had some knee problems. I tore my ACL when I was in college. So this would have been, I graduated in 95. So it was a couple years after college. I was on the East Coast. Both Ben and I grew up in Massachusetts. We didn't know each other though. So I moved to Idaho immediately after college, and then I was in California, and I tore my knee again while working for the Forest Service. So I was getting workers' comp and no job, so I was playing a lot of guitar, or more guitar, obviously, because I had the time. And the buddy that I went to college with lived in Nederland, and he's like, and I touched base with him, he was another musician, so we used to play music together. And I called him one time, and he was like, man, you should come out here. You could stay with me until you find a place. He's like, the music scene's awesome. There's like picks happening around town, down in Boulder, in Ward. He's like, we could start a band. And I'm thinking, I did go to school for forestry, but I can't do anything now because I'm laid up. So I finished the job because it was a seasonal full-time job for the Forest Service, but it wrapped up in October. So it might even have been September. I took my time down to Southern Cal to visit my sister. And then I went up through Arizona and Utah and kind of I had a Land Cruiser, 1982 Toyota Land Cruiser that I could sleep in the back because I didn't have a lot of things. And so took my time getting there. I got there in the middle of a huge snowstorm, opened the door in Nederland. When I finally got there I was like pushing the snow out of the way to open the door. I'm like, all right, I'm here. It literally was music that brought me to Nederland.
I met Jeff in Champaign, the University of Illinois, and then we kind of went our separate ways. He went to Boulder and Nederland afterwards. I think his decision was influenced about going to Rocky Grass. I ended up going to Seattle and I lived in my buddy's basement for a while and I just played banjo on the streets. And I had some money that I had saved and I was kind of looking for a job and I was in touch with Jeff every once in a while, but he finally in April, my money was kind of running out and playing on the streets in Seattle was actually pretty lucrative at the time because nobody played the banjo then. And so no one knew what the hell was happening when you see the little kind of street guy playing one. But I was kind of out of money and kind of things weren't really coalescing for me in Seattle as much as I loved it there. And Jeff persuaded me to move to Nederland, and he said, he's like, "Oh, I'll get your rent until you find a job and all that stuff." It was a very generous offer, and so I was like, "Okay, I'll just go to Nederland and see what it's all about." He just kind of asked for me to come out. He's like, "It's a good scene out here," so that's why I went. And I think I took like my last few $100s and got a Greyhound bus and rode out to Nederland, and it was just, yeah, I kind of had like this kind of unfinished room upstairs. I was informed though that no one could get the phone turned on because Jeff had like several outstanding debts to AT&T. And so like I had to put the phone in my name and then I had to put the heat in my name. And then he did pay for my first month's rent, which I thought was really generous until I got a job. Then he asked for the money back. So it was kind of like a gotcha moment. And eventually though, he got me out of the B&F where I was working as like a stock guy. He got me a sweet job washing dishes at the Verve, and then I graduated to line cook, and that's kind of where we hatched the idea. I would bring my banjo to work and play in the walk-in freezer and stuff like that, like during my breaks, and the owners were like always ripping bongs with us, so that was fun. But yeah, then we had the idea that like, oh well, maybe it'd be kind of cool, since me and Jeff kind of had a musical vocabulary going, like maybe it'd be cool to host like a jam on Wednesday nights. And, they're like, we'll give you, each $50 and all the margaritas you can drink. And I'm like, this is the best. Yeah, absolutely. And the pick it was really fun. And it is definitely where like the whole Yonder thing started really, and the seed to that whole thing took off. But those picks were like super fun, and the word got out pretty fast, and they were like really crowded, and there would be like multiple jams going on all over the dining room and and stuff like that. So there'd be like just these massive groups of people. I remember one time Snake Oil Medicine Show came through town, and they they were playing up in Netherlands somewhere or on the way to somewhere, and they came up to the jam, and it was just like this crazy amount of musicians that would go there, and it was a really vibrant and good times, but once me and Adam and Ben and Jeff played together, we sort of were like, well, whoa, we recognized something, even though we probably would be hard pressed to say exactly what it was. We just sort of recognized that it was a sound.
Do you know when the first time was that you guys all played together? Do you have any memory of that?
I want to say it was July of 98.
Yep. Yeah. So basically, to backtrack a hair, Jeff and Dave and Greg Garrison played a show at the Wolf Tongue, which is an old bar that's no longer there in Nederland. And my buddy, my roommate, who not the guy that brought me to Colorado, but a guy that I came with to Colorado that I was living with in California. He was a guitar bass player. He went to that show and they were like, hey, if you know any guitar players, let me know. And he's like, yeah, I know. He comes back the next day and he's like, yeah, these guys are really good. He's like, I know we're in a band together, but I think you should. He was really cool. He's like, I think you should go talk to him. They say they work at the Verve, the Swiss Chalet building, and to just go down there. And so I went down there, and I was like, hey, walked in on Dave in the bathroom. That's my first meeting with him. He's on the toilet.
That's one does.
So I told him my intentions, told him about what my buddy told me. And he's like, oh, well, Jeff was like, yeah, we already found a guitar player, but we're just going to start doing this pick on Wednesday nights. Why don't you come down? So the first time they hosted it, it was just the three of us with my buddy Dan, who played bass. So until it caught on, that kind of started like that. It was just a few people. And then as it grew, so it wasn't like I wasn't asked to be in the band. We just picked, every Wednesday, that was like a pick. We'd see each other at the Acoustic Coffee House, sometimes see each other at the mill site in Ward. And then fast forward, so that would have been May of 98. And then in July of 98, Jeff talked to Ben and said, "Yo, come up." And I think, was that the first time you came, Ben? When we played together?
Yeah, it was.
So then because I hadn't met him before, it didn't mean that he wasn't there, because sometimes it was pretty packed and there was a lot of people. But I remember specifically, we used to kind of play out into like where the chairs were I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was more like we'd make a circle around the tables, near the tables. But this one particular night, when the four of us played together, we were like right near the bar. And like we stood in a circle, and Jeff was like, "Hey," because Jeff knew what songs I knew, because we'd been picking together, and Dave knew what songs I knew. And then we were saying to Ben, like, "Hey, do you know this song? Do you know that song?" And we just sang some songs together and picked the harmonies. And, the four of us had never played together. And my experience was, that was really cool. These guys are good, And I went to as I remember it, and they can each tell their own version of it. After we played a few, we took a break, and I went to get a Guinness, and I grabbed my beer, and I turned around, and Jeff and Dave are like right in my face. And Dave's like, "You want to be in a band?" And Jeff's like, "Yeah, man, want to be in a band?" And I'm like, "Sure." I was in a band with those other guys, but I knew this just felt better. And so I just said, "Yeah, absolutely." And then they had said the same thing to Ben. And shortly after that, we started rehearsing, and our first real show was in September of that year. So
they're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. You'll never tame him, darling, and he'll break your heart in two, and after that he still ain't through. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. Up till dawn and drinking every night, or bailing him out in the morning after another barroom fight. Cook for him a sub he will never see. Briefcase toting man he'll never be. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. You'll never tame him, darling, and he'll break your heart in two, and after that he still ain't through. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. Wondering if the car is wrecked, if he's dead or not. He'll meet you at the ballet after just one more Jägermeister shot. That $500 you loaned him that you will never see. Good upstanding Christian man that boy will never be. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. You'll never tame him, darling, and he'll break your heart in two, and after that he still ain't through. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. Floor. He explains that's where he fell down when he came in the door. After all of this, my darling, ain't it plain to see that a whiskey drinking, bluegrass listening, Carhartt wearing, all night Roman rambler he'll always be. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go. You'll never tame him, darling, and he'll break your heart in two, and after that he still ain't through. They're still rambling, and the rambler let him go.
When Yonder came to be, bands like Old and in the Way, Newgrass Revival, and the Country Gentlemen had already made their mark, while bands like the Flecktones, Leftover Salmon, String Cheese Incident were paving a path forward for progressive string music. What did coming along at that pivotal time for the subgenre of progressive bluegrass and string music provide for you guys in your direction?
The cool thing about Leftover and String Cheese and the Flecktones and that kind of stuff, I think they had stretched the boundaries of like what could be included in this kind of music, obviously. And they did it through like technical virtuosity and that kind of thing, like really sophisticated kinds of music, I would call it. And, and they were sort of the logical extension from the Country Gentlemen and the Dillards and stuff like that, Newgrass Revival. But like I think we were sort of closer to like the Dillards or the Country Gentlemen, or the
Seldom
Seldom
Seen.
Seen.
Yeah.
We were closer to those kinds of bands than those other bands were. And I think that we kind of were like a nice counterpoint to like this very technical, odd time signatures. Like I said before, like fairly sophisticated listening kind of. And we were more primal or closer to the traditional side of bluegrass than they were. And so I think because the environment was so overtly technical, we could kind of flourish as a band that was more, wang bang than perfection. You know what I mean? We could kind of evince a more like a emotional, almost sort of acoustic type of throwback to where those guys had departed from.
For many, I think you guys are a bridge from jam to bluegrass. I know for myself, I can say that absolutely. When me listening to some traditional bluegrass and saying, wow, this is really not for me. And then listening to Yonder extensively and then saying, maybe I'll revisit the traditional stuff too. And it, fell in love with the whole genre and the subgenre. And for me, you can't really talk about progressive music without first acknowledging the role that other genres like jazz play in the progressing of ideas. And I think of psychedelics and the role that they play in expanding creativity. And can you guys talk about whether or not those things impacted your direction?
I mean, psychedelics, absolutely. I mean, I even contemplated joining the military when I was in high school. So I think like after I did psychedelics, I went from possibly joining the military to just wanting to live in the woods. So, and also just having a better appreciation for basically the arts in general, but specifically music. So I think that all my musical influences from my first deciding what I liked when I was small, either what my parents listened to or what was on the radio or MTV, up through me meeting these guys, was helped form, because you said we were a bridge for bluegrass and jam music. Well, Old and in the Way was that for me. I liked it. There were a lot of similarities in bluegrass. It was high energy with acoustic instruments, which was something that was so cool because the only high energy stuff I really knew about, at least could conceive, or what I had in my collection and what I'd heard, was heavy music or heavier. Definitely plugged in, definitely drums. Yeah, it's kind of a two-part question. You asked about things like psychedelics and jazz. So not jazz. I mean, I like jazz. I don't know. Definitely didn't influence me as far as Yonder Mountain. Maybe the closest thing to it would be Grisman, like dog music. Has definitely some elements of swing and some jazz in there. But I think we weren't, yes, we did do psychedelics on stage here and there throughout Yonder Mountain's career, but it definitely wasn't something that defined us, in the same way that it did with the Grateful Dead. But I definitely think it influenced me, and probably all of us. It definitely influenced me about who I became. Maybe I would have became the same person without it, but it may have sped it along. Maybe it would have taken me years longer to find out who I really was. Because, psychedelics, stuff like mushrooms and LSD kind of smash your ego, and make you see things differently, totally different perspective.
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. It was immensely boring. So you needed psychedelics to live.
I'm from Detroit. I can relate to that.
You probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that's a wonderful moment in life, when you're like, oh, you kind of become acutely aware of different possibilities or scenarios and stuff like that. And for me, it was definitely like, I'm getting the hell out of here and going to college anywhere other than here. I think maybe psychedelics had something to do with that.
Did you guys, as you were playing what I guess many would define as bluegrass music, did you find acceptance from other bluegrass bands? Did the more traditional bands respect and accept the looseness and progressiveness and jamminess that Yonder Mountain String Band brought to the table?
No.
Yeah. I mean, situationally, we were in Colorado, right? So bands that we had access to that would be considered very loosely more traditional. That really the only example of that local to us at the time was Hot Rise, and they were certainly nice to us. But then again, they're also interacting at the same time with String Cheese and with Leftover Salmon, and had known them for a long time. With Salmon, you think of the bands that came before Leftover Salmon that they were pursuing, like Left Hand String Band. So it was those relationships had already been established. So when we came along, they were probably just like, oh, here's another, this is a new thing. We shall watch their career with great interest. And then Daryl Anger, in particular, was another, a luminary of string music and super important to us. And he was very instrumental and supportive. But then little moments like, Adam, you can relate, when we had our first gig at Rocky Grass, also Craig Ferguson and Planet Bluegrass being supportive of us pretty much right out of the gate. That's one of the most significant things in our career, to my mind. Adam, you walked off the stage and had an interaction with Norman Blake. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, he said it to both. Dave and I walked down the stairs, and he's like, "That's some fine picking there, boys."
That's cool.
So, I think that in that respect, local to us, those were the impactful interactions and relationships. But in a wider sense, I'm just thinking now about like traditional bluegrass festivals that we might have had the opportunity to play. I certainly didn't feel welcome, and I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel like those places were our home at all.
Nah.
Yeah, meeting Norman Blake and Courtney Johnson's wife was crazy for me after that Rocky Grass. I love Courtney Johnson's banjo playing, so to meet his wife was awesome.
Salmon, they weren't in the traditional scene, but they were advocates of us early on. And so they having people, not only when we first started playing around Colorado, not only having the people that saw us like give us the energy, but also a band like Salmon and people like even Pete Wernick being an advocate of what we were doing gave us the guts to leave the state and go tour the rest of the country,
Absolutely.
Just circling back a little bit, the previous question that you asked about the sort of landscape of Colorado at the time, I think an anecdote that's really telling is when Yonder had our first gig offer. So you think about like, what's the landscape like? Here's this band where we all just get together and we think we want to be in a band and we start practicing. And really quickly, we had this opportunity for, which I remember as our first gig. And so our first gig was opening up for a band called Runaway Truck Ramp. It was another sort of more along the lines of Leftover Salmon, I think. Drums, bluegrass related. But our first show was to a sold out Fox Theater. So the landscape was fertile. It's not like our first show was to our girlfriend and like friends at 5 people in a bar. Our first show was to 650 people in the Fox Theater. So the landscape was very fertile for our kind of music,
When that happens, is it an aha moment of we have something here and we got to keep doing this and this could be fruitful? And 26 years later, large crowds are going to be singing all the words to our songs. Is there any thought of where this could have gone and how influential that this could have been?
I felt that aha moment basically that first night we played together when they said, let's be a band. I remember telling my dad, he came out to visit a couple weeks after that first pick. My parents came out and he and I went for a hike. And I remember telling him like, yeah, I'm joining this band, and he's like, practical, blue collar, like, yo, you went to college for forestry. What you sure you know what you're doing? And I said, these 3 guys, I got a feeling about this and I think it's going to be good. And I don't know why I felt it, but I just felt it. I was like, I saw an individuality in them that each of them had their own piece of the puzzle to make Yonder Mountain, and I felt that I had to try, and I exceeded my highest of expectations back then in the first like 3 to 5 years of the band. I was like, all right, well, we made it,
At the time that Yonder was forming, I was in a band with my best friend in the world since preschool. And we'd moved to Colorado at the same time with the intention of having a musical life together, And I remember after meeting, Adam and Jeff and Dave, and having that a very similar experience internally of certainly not being like, we're going to be playing Red Rocks one day and whatever. I didn't conceptualize that, but I knew enough to go, I have to go tell my best friend in the world that I can't play music with him anymore. And I knew that that would damage that relationship, and in my imagination, irreparably. And I also knew that I had to do it.
How'd that go?
I mean, we're friends again, and he understands now. Obviously, a lot of people understand now, but at the time it was hard, and it was different for me. Like Adam's dad's, and who I had the great pleasure of knowing now for a long time, certainly has a different relationship with Adam than my dad had with me. My dad was a musician, so I had a little bit less of Adam's parents support him for sure, but my dad was ultimately encouraging me, having known me for my entire life and seeing my relationship with music. My parents were fully supportive of at least giving me the opportunity to have a musical life.
He cracks a wicked smile at his foot pressed to the floor, flying down country roads that he's been down before. One of just 3 men that the sheriff cannot catch, and he's traveling 90 miles an hour down the Bolton stretch. The first time we had seen his face was back in '84. Walked right into old O'Hare's, he robbed that liquor store. The sheriff tried to catch him, but the man, he got away, and he didn't show his face in town again until today. He didn't come for justice, didn't come to make amends, doesn't ask forgiveness, he's not looking to make friends, just that he was passing through with money wearing thin. Now he's traveling down the Bolton stretch again. Doesn't seem to care, knows it's time to leave again, but doesn't know to where. Though he stole a lot of money, it's not enough for bail, and there are 2 blue lights behind him now, the sheriff's on his trail. Since the day that he was born, he spent his whole life living free, with nothing but the loosest ties to friends and family. No punishment will make him care about the things he's done, and if he lives another 20 years, he'll live them on the run. He didn't come for justice, didn't come to make amends, doesn't ask forgiveness, he's not looking to make friends, just that he was passing through with money wearing thin. Now he's traveling down the Bolton stretch again.
At what point do you feel like you have enough songs, enough material to approach the studio setting? I look back at, it's been 25 years since the release of your debut album, Elevation. And at what point do you guys say, all right, it's time to put these tracks down?
The time frame is more about the money. Like, we had to wait till we had money to record a record. We had most of those songs predate Yonder even. Not Jeff's song so much, but Dave's, Ben, and mine. Do you guys remember that the same?
Yeah, more or less. Me and Jeff had written one song together, kind of, and then I had some stuff laying around. Yeah, there really was no systematic way of understanding what we could compile or not, and we're just sort of like, a really nice guy who loved the band, Stan Hunter, gave us some money to record the record. And we blocked out a week, and we're like, okay, let's just go, work on it till it's done, with the stuff that we have.
Do you guys remember how? Because we did not have money. We didn't have the money to record a record. We did have original songs. What was the motivation for even asking Stan for the money? It had to be, so Stan was very good friends with our first sound engineer and our website designer, and a real mastermind in a lot of ways for us as a band. His name was Dave Hardy. It still is Dave Hardy. and he was really important in the early days. And his networking with his friend Stan allowed us to have the financial resources to make a record. But I don't remember, like, did we just sort of think like, well, we need a record. We're a band now. We have songs and we need to record. I don't know. I don't remember how that happened.
I don't either.
I just have flashes.
I feel like we would always stay at Stan's house,
right,
in Davis, and we loved it because he had like a kegerator or made his own beer. It was always super fun hang. And I think that he like unprompted offered to give us some money to make a record, and we decided to do that.
I mean, it's possible too that Dave knew that we wanted to do one and we didn't have the money, and maybe talked to Stan, and then Stan came to us. I don't remember specifically asking him, and I feel like since that would have been like kind of a not stressful, but it would have been an uncomfortable conversation to have, that I would have remembered it if we had it. So I'm guessing probably Dave Party probably said something to Stan like, hey, can you help these guys out? Or, I mean, I suppose we could ask Stan, but I'm not even sure.
The loan was for $10,000, right?
Yeah.
It was a big financial commitment on our part, which I don't remember feeling uneasy about, but acknowledging that was a lot of money.
Yeah, compared to what we were making on a per gig basis, that was a real lot of money.
How did we find or hear about or come to the whole process? Like, we had known Sally Van Meter.
That was my next question. How do you run into Sally Van Meter?
She worked at HP Wood Songs. So
I think we didn't
retail.
I'm trying to think of like the first time I met her though. Was it maybe like Rocky Grass or was she at Tell You What, or there was maybe some local festival or pick? Did she ever come to a pick? It seems to me like she was just there. Like my memory of it is like, I'm going to produce your first record kind of thing, but I don't remember.
She might have actually said that, to be honest with you, because that's something Sally would say.
Right.
And that could be it. But we did meet Sally. I remember maybe meeting her through Leftover Salmon. And then through Sally, we would have found Charles Sawtell's studio because of their relationship. And through Sally, we would have met James Tuttle, who was the engineer.
Right.
And so we met Daryl through Sally?
Well, she talked to Daryl about recording on our record before we met Daryl. So when Daryl did those, and Mike Marshall, we had never met them before.
Wow.
In person. They did those tracks before we ever even met.
I mean, you guys, though, we're forgetting who got us here. Steve Burnside.
Well, there was a lot of people along the way who kind of, honestly, a little anecdote. You know, Jeff and I were in a band together before Yonder Mountain was a thing. Right. We were in a band called the Zooks of Zydeco. Jeff played washboard. It's a Zydeco band, a Cajun band. It was a wedding band, basically. And I played bass, I forgot that until now. So I wonder how that would have been in the summer of 98, playing those. Yeah.
Was it after we started rehearsing together or before that?
Maybe concurrently.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a little bit before, because Jeff made some money playing washboard for the Zooks of Zydeco, and then he went and bought a pendulum, you know, the mixer and he came home and he wouldn't shut up about that goddamn pendulum. It was the best thing ever. You've got to get one. Oh, you're just a dishwasher, Dave. You don't have any money. You know, you know. I'm like, God, I don't have any money to buy a pendulum. I can barely get any strings.
I got two in the room right next door, sitting high up in a closet.
Yeah, and then it's like, who's going to get the chart stuff? That's what Bela uses, and blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, I remember meeting Sally, though, at HP Wood Songs. Me and Jeff were in there picking or something like that. And then later on, me and you, Adam, would meet Bruce Molsky through Sally.
That's right.
Van Meter at HP Wood Songs after they had moved. I remember that was really funny to meet Bruce Molsky, who's like this crazy old-time musician. and you think he's just going to be the biggest hayseed in the world, and he just has a total Bronx accent. It's like
Super
from New
thick
York.
New York accent.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, well, how about that? But yeah, Tell You What is factored in there, and whenever I think of Tell You What, I think of Steve Burnside.
We should probably tell people what Tell You What is.
We should. It's like a little knockoff festival in Niwot that may have ran for 4 or 5 years, and like, Vince Herman would be there, and kind of all the luminaries of the Boulder bluegrass scene would kind of go there and have pickup bands and different bands and different names for their band and stuff like that. It was free, I believe, and there was some camping, but I do believe it ended up getting shut down because it just got out of hand.
I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about what people like Sally Van Meter, Vince Herman, Burl, those kind of folks mean to this genre of music and the Colorado music scene.
The thing about the Colorado music scene is it's not genre specific, although I would say there is a large acoustic scene, or there was. I don't know if there still is much. The audience are eclectic music listeners. They listen to everything. So like Ben said earlier about not really liking the trad bluegrass scene because they didn't like us. Colorado's scene was so, I don't know, forgiving or they genuinely liked what we were doing and friendly to give us the confidence. So Sally kind of in the same way that Hot Rise played with, Salmon and String Cheese, Sally did the same thing. Burl was buddies with Vince Herman, and also having bands like String Cheese and Salmon more or less endorse us and give us props and help us get into festivals. And, Vince did that. He got us into High Sierra. So they were instrumental for us. And I think that I don't really know what genre it is because it's definitely not bluegrass or whatever. It's just it is the Colorado bluegrass scene, maybe. Really, String Cheese diverged from bluegrass years ago. I mean, they still have some of it in their music, but Salmon has also diverged, but they were always kind of eclectic. We were the band without drums that was trying to be weird without, none of us growing up with bluegrass is part of it, right? So playing bluegrass, having a bluegrass lineup, playing our original music. And so it appealed to a lot of people, because I think a lot of people that in Nederland and Boulder and, Boulder and Nederland used to be a lot more hippie. And so there was a jam crowd, whether it was the Grateful Dead or Fish back then, those are the two big bands, And so they liked what we were doing. You throw in a Dead tune even now and people love it.
And I think it's an important sort of thing in our career because we weren't or didn't feel welcome in a traditional scene. Had we felt welcomed in the traditional scene, our career might be quite a bit different. But because we weren't, and because we had advocates like Vince Herman and people who were at least, interested in working with us, who were at least technically our superiors, but also advocating for us and maybe seeing something in us that we weren't able to see ourselves in terms of like a validity. But we were steered towards jam festivals, eclectic festivals like High Sierra and others. And arriving to those, it was critical that because we were the only example of a band like us. Well, I mean, at the time, I don't think there was another example of a band like us. Or you know what I mean by that? Like that sort of whatever it is that Yonder was doing back then. And so we'd show up and there's, widespread panic, or fill in the blanks of all the bands that would Government Mule or whoever, Sound Tribe, and then Yonder Mountain String Band. But it just all worked together. It wasn't like the people going there had like, well, I only like electronica, or I only like roots rock, or I only like Southern rock. It was like, I love this festival and I'm going to go see all of the stuff that I can see. And hey, there's this band from Colorado that whatever the buzz was, let's go check them out. And that's the landscape that we found ourselves in. And I'm very grateful for that, because I think we would have suffered had we been steered towards a traditional landscape, maybe even primarily because Yonder was never going to win any contests. You think about what happens and what I see happening in bluegrass music for a long, long time. It's classicalized. It's all about technique, and it has waves, and there's still cool things going on in it, but primarily it's contest driven, technique driven. Who can play faster? Who's got the best, hippest, gnarliest arrangement of forked deer with all the cross picking and the, just that kind of stuff, which
Who has it?
It's Jake Eddy, I think.
Jake Eddy, yeah, right.
That dude rips. Oh my God.
He rips.
I love that stuff, and I get totally jazzed in my mind with that stuff. I can appreciate it and everything, but it doesn't make me feel anything in my heart. And jam band music, and maybe that dovetails back into like the psychedelic conversation, because then we can talk about energy, and what does that even mean, and what is it, the energy of a music or the spirit of a music, or things that I would never even have conceptualized prior to experiences with psychedelics. Although I also feel like especially being a father now, I think my experiences with psychedelics happened when I was too young, but they were critically important. And then because of them, I can have this conversation about what's the energy that Yonder Mountain had, because it wasn't our technique that was gaining us fans. Certainly not. Songwriting, sure. But it was our spirit and the energy that we had. And what does that even mean? I don't know.
I can attest to that as a fan. I can attest to it being a feeling. And that's not a shot at your playing.
No,
I don't mean to suggest that we're bad.
Yeah,
we're not.
Yeah.
You can't be bad and have a career. I'm just saying we weren't going to go out and sit down and win the contests, and didn't even want to. Or Dave, I guess you entered a contest once, or Adam, maybe you did. I don't know. But for me, it was just like that's just for the birds, man. Well, I guess if you got to you want to win a new instrument, cool, because some of the prizes are great and money is cool. But otherwise, it's just like adjudication and judging. You are not as good as this other person here. You're third place. That guy there, he's second place. So he's one place better than you.
Right.
And that has no place in music. I hate it. Oh, I hate it.
I remember walking off the stage at Winfield. Adam backed me up at Winfield. I decided I was going to be in the banjo contest. And I went and played in the first round. And I can't forget what I was told afterward, but I can't remember the name of the guy who said it. But this banjo player comes up to me and goes, "You're not going anywhere playing that shit." I'm like, okay, I guess not. If you say so.
I think it's healthy to remove yourself from that scene, from that vibe, especially for the direction you guys went. You didn't need the nod from Nashville, if you will.
Right? We wouldn't have got it anyway.
I know.
That's the thing, is like, we had no plans musically as a band. We never had an intention. And even to this day, a lot of the ways that I try to write, and it seems like everyone else in the band, we're not writing with any intent unless we say like, oh, we really need a song that stretches out a little bit, or if you're going to write one, we need some fast tunes, hence the name Yonder Mountain String Band. We thought we were going to be this like trad sounding bluegrass band, but then when we just started playing together, it morphed into what it did. We never said like, let's purposely do this. We didn't try to copy or emulate anything. And I don't think we sound like anybody, even now.
I agree with that. I think a lot of people may sound like you intentionally, because there are a lot of bands coming out of Colorado that have tried to capture the Yonder essence, if you will, the Yonder sound. But I see you guys as pioneers in a very
That's
specific
a rabbit hole into madness right there.
But I mean that. I do. I see you guys as doing something that nobody did before, and that has influenced quite a bit of people.
A man stood in the shadows, his face was dripping sweat. He took a break, running, but he wasn't done yet. Looked over his shoulder when he heard the barking hounds. Dug his feet into the earth and headed out of town. The town line's far away, and he won't sleep for days because he just slept with Annie, and she's the sheriff's wife. Now the sheriff's men have got him running for his life. But he wasn't thinking clear when she put her hand onto his leg and filled his glass with beer. The deputy did see them and tracked the sheriff down. Just had time to grab his clothes and highball out of town. The town line's far away, and he won't sleep for days. And even if he makes it, there's nothing he can do but hope and pray the sheriff there hasn't heard the news. Thinking about the past, about all the women he had known and living life too fast. He heard a noise behind him, felt a gun against his head. Should have known the sheriff wouldn't rest till he was dead. And the town line's far away, and he's 6 feet in the grave. He's lying there with Annie, who was the sheriff's wife, till the sheriff and his men robbed him of their lives.
Let's bring it current day. I want to talk about a couple of big things that are coming up for Yonder Mountain. And I wonder if you would speak to the things that you had mentioned.
Well, we got a new EP, but it's an old recording. So 5-song EP from 2010, 2011. Got it right here.
Nice, dude.
And it's a 10-inch. So
move it over more in front of your face so we can see it. It was cut off. Yeah.
Wow.
I haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah, and there's the back. Ripcord Blues, What the Night Brings, Pockets, Don't Lean on Me, I'd Like Off. So it's the original lineup, recorded December 13th and 14th of 2010, and then one day, January 28th in 2011. So it was 3 days. It's cool. We just did a small release. It's going to be a digital release, but as far as the record, it's a white vinyl, which is cool.
That's beautiful.
But we've been sitting on this for a while, and since we're playing all these songs now, including Jeff's song "What the Night Brings," seemed like a good time to bring it back. And all we had to do is mix it and master it, so it was pretty cool, and get the artwork done.
Has this been announced prior? Have you guys mentioned that this is happening?
I mean, I don't know if we've done an official release per
No,
se.
just talking about it a little bit on stage.
Yeah, and also if you go to our merch site, it says coming soon. I think it's really cool that we still have some, and there are a few other things, unreleased stuff, that we still have some stuff that was with Jeff and the four original lineup that's not released yet. And we think it's really kind of like it's a special thing for us because I know fans will be psyched to hear it, to hear something that, no one's heard before yet. We planned on doing a whole record again. It was really hard to get us all in the studio. And this would have been our first studio session without a producer where we self-produced. It was a little problematic to get, to make time. We toured so much that when we were home, we all kind of wanted our own space. And, we ended up this would have come out if we had done a full record. This probably would have had all the songs on EP 13 as well. So like the second session was January of 2011. About 4 months later, the band all came to my house and we recorded I think it was 13 songs, but we set up a vocal mic in the middle and 2 instrument mics, and we just recorded all the songs. And I think I want to release that at some point because it's cool. It's all live, but it's hard to get the tones. It's not going to sound awesome because, we're in a smallish room. It wasn't a treated room. I just set up some mics in my house and we recorded it. It would be cool even if we just shared it. It's something down the road.
I think with the proper context.
I believe it had all these songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of the songs that ended up being on an EP 13, and then some ones that Jeff ended up putting on his solo record, and some stuff that was never that we just never recorded. I mean, like I said, it's 13 tracks I can think of. I know Don't Lean on Me, Pockets, What the Night Brings, and I'd Like Off. I don't know if Ripcord was in that session, but I know 4 of the 5 songs on this were in that session as well. So that would have been a full record. We never got to it, and then we parted ways, and so that stuff was just sitting. We thought it would be cool to have it. We also recorded a new record in November, and that'll be out in November.
Great. What was the meaning behind the artwork on the EP there? Can you describe the artwork for folks who aren't able to see it visually?
It's a guy stomping on a hornet's nest. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, but splitting up the original Yonder was kind of a polarizing thing to do.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was some people have opinions about that. And so the artwork, I don't know that there exists a bluegrass band, certainly, that has been subject to the degree of intense vitriol and hate online that Yonder Mountain String Band has weathered, I guess, which I think speaks to, if you're talking to the glass is half full Ben Kaufman, that's because that band was so critically important to so many people. And its dissolution had an impact, and a big one, I think, of equal weight to how important that band was to people. But I also think that it's, in my opinion, it also speaks to the profound lack of grounded mental health that exists in the music scene that we find ourselves in. The struggles that people have, often undiagnosed or unpursued. I know there's there's some advocacy happening now or attention being brought to it. But what I witness are people just lost and indulging in their hate and their unwellness. And I also see that coming out directed negatively towards Yonder Mountain as it exists today. And so by releasing this record with Jeff on it, right, and maybe even with one of the songs in there, I think there has been a story going around or this sort of false history that What the Night Brings was written within the context of Yonder Mountain. It was a Yonder song. And a lot of people have gone on to think, oh no, that was a Jeff tune and it only blah, blah, blah. Like, no, that song existed within the framework of the original Yonder Mountain, and we all had a hand in its arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
That will sort of correct a bit of revisionist history that's happened. But we fully know that by releasing this record with the original lineup, we are opening ourselves up to, once again, that online opinion mill. And a lot of it will be, I think, hopefully most people will be like, cool, I can't wait to listen to this. This is great.
I think that's the reason we're doing it, is like, ultimately, in spite of all that and the negativity that might come from it, there's going to be so many people that appreciate it. And likewise, we are happy to have it and to be able to share it, because I think it's cool as hell. Like, it's a snapshot in time. It's literally 3 days in a span of like a month that we got together and recorded, and we have it.
I think doing that reflects a very healthy band. I think taking that approach and releasing that material, it reflects a healthy band who's comfortable with the past and comfortable with the present.
I mean, I think ultimately, if people want to, I've said this before, if you don't like Yonder Mountain without Jeff Austin, I have no problem with that. You can't help what you feel. Like, if you don't like the music, I can't help what music I like and what I don't like. It's kind of innate almost. And so if you don't like it, that's totally fine. It's just being vocal and trying to hurt us, like, negatively. Not that I give, I don't care at all what people think.
You can't really account for the trauma of others.
Yeah. But I think even if you don't like us now, like, this is something that everyone can appreciate. I think it's cool. I mean, it is just, it was a session basically, and it was short. 3 days of recording. And like I said, it was going to be a whole record, but we just abandoned it. And then years went by, and to us, it felt like, if you don't do a project all at once, we did a couple of EPs in 2019 and we never released them. And because, like, too much time goes by and you feel like, I don't know, and it was the same thing with this. So that's why we decided, well, let's just do a new EP when we did EP 13. And that's only 4 songs. That was 1 song each. And that was it with the original lineup. That was the last thing we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
There is other stuff that we could release of original. I still have yet to transfer the data, but I have some sessions from Town by Town and Old Hands that are on these data tapes. But it's data, like, if I could get it onto a hard drive, then I could open the software and we could check out what's on it. But currently the players are really strange. It's not like a regular. I talked to James Tuttle about it and he knows what they are, but no one seems to have one. But we'll be able to get that. But I did get all the tracks from off of ADAT from Elevation last year, and I have all, like, a lot of the. I have all the original notes and stuff and everything too. It's super cool. Like, some of those songs, like, was like 2 takes and that's it, done. When you're doing ADAT too, it's not as hard as going reel to reel, but it's not like Pro Tools or Logic where you're just like, yeah, do another take, no problem. It's kind of a pain. And so you gotta, you don't have as many chances. Or you do, but it's time. If time's money, right? You're in the studio, you want to get stuff done. There is more stuff out there, whether we release it or not. Like I said, that's session at my house, and there's other. But this is something that definitely was studio that we never released. We have a couple songs at least one that I could think of from sessions we did in LA, song that we never released. But there's a reason we didn't release it, because we didn't really like it that much. But we could always. There's stuff out there, but
there were 2 from those sessions.
Yeah.
Don't forget Rosarita.
What? Was I there? Why don't I remember this?
Yeah, there was just this kind of like some noodly dominant 7th thing, and then Jeff started singing this song about, like, someone named Rosarita, and yeah, we're like, should we record it? And I think we all just looked at each other. We're like, no.
Hey, give me a second, guys. I'm gonna go learn how to play the pedal steel real quick. I want to overdub some stuff.
Oh boy.
Yeah, right.
Thank you guys for being so brave, I think, is one of the things I want to say. You can laugh at that. Dave is laughing, for those who can't see. I mean that. It takes thick skin to weather the criticism. Maybe I'll take a second and apologize for some of the criticism I've projected on the band. I'm so grateful for what you guys have weathered and what you guys have been through and the story that you've told. And thank you. I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for saying so. I mean, as far as the criticism is concerned, I'm sort of like, is this all you guys got? Is this it?
Begging people to turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, what do you got?
Well, it's also that, the reality is, and that the three of us know, and that no one else could possibly understand, is what it was like.
Yeah.
That band ended, and it had to.
Right.
It had to. And all of the thing that, like Adam's a little bit more like stoic, I guess, about it. He's just his personality type is, I'm envious of it a lot of times because he's very centered. But the thing that frustrates me is this, what exists is this false history, this false narrative, right? And it's just been allowed to sort of perpetuate itself, and it's all bullshit. And yet the three of us just sort of, I don't know what, sometimes I'm frustrated by it. We made a decision to kind of, I guess, take the high road, didn't we?
Yeah. It's always a better way. Arguing and trying to, like, people make waves because they want an argument, I'm not trying to convince anyone to like us. Like, we are who we are. And like Ben said, what actually happened is it wasn't easy, and the decision wasn't easy, and we didn't take it lightly by any stretch. We were a family, the four of us, for a long time. And we all loved each other, and we really tried to help each other. And there comes a point where you got to be like, it's not working. And it was a conscious decision by all four of us to say that it wasn't working.
It's a cold, cold moon out tonight, and it's a cold, cold point on your knife. Could I call myself a man if I left by the morning line? And I'd be 40 miles from Denver when you woke up all alone. I'd be 40 miles from Denver and 3 days from my home, in that cool mountain air on an Appalachian trail. Oh, life is better there. I stood here waiting much too long, and I'd rather leave this minute than try to carry on. And I'd be 40 miles from Denver, headed eastbound on the track. I'd be 40 miles from Denver and trying to get back to that cool mountain air on an Appalachian trail. Whoa, life is better there. Tonight, and it's a cold, cold point on your knife. Could I call myself a man if I left by the morning line? And I'd be 40 miles from Denver when you woke up all alone. I'd be 40 miles from Denver that cool mountain air on an Appalachian trail. Whoa, life is better there. Whoa, life is better there. Whoa, life is better there. Whoa, life is better there.
Nick Piccinini and now Coleman Smith playing fiddle with us has been super fun. And for the new record and moving forward, like, this year's been great so far. I feel really good about what we're doing right now and the songs that are coming out.
Well, the shows that we've been playing, I mean, there's something happening right now in terms of again, we're talking about feeling and energy, right? And there's something happening with Yonder Mountain right now that is really wonderful to be a part of. You know, we're connecting with audiences. I mean, shoot, like we're seeing sellouts again. You know, like that's pretty awesome. And this band now has its own sound, but it's still Yonder Mountain.
Right.
And, you know, which is an interesting thing to sort of conceptualize. We're looking back 25 years or whatever at this record that we put out that I honestly have a hard time listening to because I can hear my Boston accent, just among a number of things. But, you know, I recognize that it's our seminal recording.
I mean, you look back at the songs on that and it's like Half Moon Rising, The Bolton Stretch Left Me in a Hole, 40 Miles from Denver, Ramblin' in the Rambler. These are classic songs, near Jamgrass traditionals, if you will, at this point for a lot of people. And I wonder why can't you listen?
I love it.
I can't wrap my head around that because it's such a special thing for me. And I'm not on the album, so I don't have to listen to myself. It's really a special thing for a lot of people.
I'll tell you, when we first transferred those ADATs, it was about little over a year ago. I think it was October or November of 22. Me and James Tuttle at E-Town, when we first heard them, like to set like off the ADAT, it was so cool. And be able to isolate the stuff when I brought it home, just to like isolate our harmonies. I was like, oh, this is so cool. Cause it was like, it's like a time capsule kind of, because we haven't heard it in that long, even though we had the ADATs, we had no way to play them because none of us had one of those Alesis machines. And so, like, granted, I don't listen to the CD or the digital version of it or anything, but I think what Ben means when it's a hard time listening to it is just because of, you know, like he's saying, is the way his accent, the way he says half moon and all that stuff, you know, right? Isn't that what you're talking about? It's not so much the playing, right? I mean, no,
it's not the playing at all. I think for me, it's a combination of sort of self-criticism and also the realities. I am starting to be able to go back and listen to like live shows and things like Adam will share with me or Julie will share with me and be like, oh man, like we were pretty good.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I've been transferring these. I have a box over here full of VHS tapes. And every once in a while, I'll throw one in and convert it, but you got to do it in real time. So to convert it to digital, it's only up through like 2004 or 5 or like the latest ones, but I'm only on 2001 and I've done probably 50 already. And I was watching one like a month ago. I was doing stuff, so I had it going, and it was like Last Concert Cafe in Houston in 2001. And I was like, man, it was like really good. And Jeff was like doing some awesome like scatting and just like making up words on the fly. And I was like, man, it was like really cool to see. I was like, man, I remembered it vaguely, but it's just a cool, again, kind of like a time capsule because none of us has seen any of this stuff in so long. It was a Big Woo, the first time we played the Big Woo family reunion. Might have been the second. It was 01. I don't know, remember the first time we played, and then we did a little like campground jam that someone videoed, and that was on there too. And it was really cool to see, like, you know, that was one of the things that, especially in the early days, Jeff had this really fun kind of vibe on stage, you know, and he was very, very, he included the crowd. And I think that's a large part of the reason why we had popularity in the early is like people like to be included in the show, right? And I think, you know, watching that stuff, to me, it's I look back on it fondly when I see it. Whereas back then, I couldn't even listen to our shows. I was too critical, right? But now enough time's gone by, and I think you can kind of look at it more objectively. You're not in that space anymore. You're literally a different person. That's 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And so it's easier to see that stuff as like, oh, that band, like, you know, it's as opposed to being like, that's me, even though that what is me in the video, like we were different. It was different.
Mm-hmm.
There's an energy that only youth can bring, really, when you're that young. It seemed like everything was new to us. We still have energy. I'm not saying we play now, but it's different. I never thought of myself thinking we had something to prove, but it seemed like we were playing with that intent. You know, it looked like it, you know, just the way we were playing. We're like, yeah, whatever, this is what we got. You like it or no? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I want to take a moment to just express some gratitude to getting to play with Nick Piccinini on mandolin. He, for whatever reason, his energy and his talent and his voice seems to be helping bring not only the, you know, it's funny to say that there are plenty of people at our show, and maybe even the majority of the people that come to see us now, that have no idea about the original lineup.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I would argue that 50%.
Wow.
But we're also seeing some of the, like, the old school fans and some of these people who, for the, you know, the second iteration of Yonder, which I had kind of think about that as sort of a swing and a miss. We had to do something, but it didn't really work for me. Anyway, it did something never really felt 100% right. I still love what we did, but it was just like, okay, I see, like, that not being, that wasn't really where it was at. But now here we are with what we have going on now with Nick, and starting to feel this sort of acceptance again from people who maybe had a hard time coming to see us or wouldn't come to see us again, even to the point where we're reintroducing some. Certainly we won't reintroduce all, but some of Jeff's songs, because they're important and they were a huge part of our band, and they're good. But that's the thing. Like, if you tell me I'm going to play a Jeff Austin song, right? Or I'm going to play a Jeff Austin Yonder song. Okay. But you better do good, because, like, that's, like, Jeff had a way about him that was unique. Thank goodness, because there can't be two, you know, that would end the universe. But if you're going to approach that, like, and you can't play a Jeff Austin song and pretend to be Jeff Austin. I see people doing that, and it strikes me as just profoundly false. But what you can do is find your own access point. And one of the things that I've observed with Nick, because we've asked something very, I don't even think he realizes how big of an ask it is. But we've asked him to perform and sing those songs, and he does them so well. There's a clarity to his voice that it's different. It's a different voice, but in terms of the clarity and power of his voice, it reminds me of Jeff when he was younger. Jeff had this clarion, crystal high harmony. It was so cool. And Nick's able to perform these songs, and he doesn't get the shade. We could have never played any of Jeff's songs in the second iteration of Yonder. Ever. I don't think.
Moreover, us singing them is different too. Like, having Nick do it, a guy who literally didn't even know who he was really before we met him. Like, he didn't really know who Jeff was, you know? So it's different if me, Dave, or Ben sang Jeff songs than when he does it, you know? It's almost like we shouldn't sing his songs, kind of. I don't know.
I would never.
Well, we tried.
Yeah, well, it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
They're a little high for me.
Octave lower.
There's a
Nick's great. He's, for a guy who grew up with bluegrass, you know, him meeting Mo really, you know, the band Mo really gave him that jam edge, or that ability to improvise and musically, and also just he understands the idea of stretching out and just letting stuff happen, as opposed to a lot of bluegrass is formulaic, you could say, I guess.
He's a very versatile player.
Oh, he's rips on so many different instruments too, and he just gets it. He play a lot of different styles and fits in really well with us.
I wonder if you guys could leave me today, each of you, with a fond experience or memory from Yonder Mountain String Band past.
I remember a thought of after that set that Ben was talking about, our very first show. So we opened for Runaway Truck Ramp, but the first half of the show was a band called Fireweed, which was Yonder Mountain, but not me, Pat Latella on guitar. And so halfway through the set, we basically tag teamed. I came up, Pat left. Pat played the first set with these guys, Jeff, Ben, and Dave. And then I came up for the second half. And like the crowd response, it was our first show. I mean, we did picks and stuff like that, but it was our first show with front of people, and it was packed house. And I remember being downstairs like after the set. I mean, that moment specifically, I remember very fondly when I first walked up on stage. I'm like, here we go, first show ever, And they were already up there, so they're already warmed up, and I'm up like, oh no. But then we went downstairs after the set, and Runaway was getting ready to go on. And I remember the four of us just sitting in a circle, and we had beers, and we're just like, awesome. And it was like, here we go. It was fun. That's something that I'll never forget,
On a separate note, Latella is a sweetheart.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a long time.
What about you, gentlemen?
Let's see this. There's a lot,
Oh, yeah?
I'll share a really funny Jeff one. So we were parked in like Russell, Kansas one day. And there was like this Ma and Pa diner across this windswept, flat highway. And me and Kevin and Jeff go in there. And like we're parked at like a Holiday Inn or a Comfort Inn and Suites or something like that. We're the bus is behind the hotel. And we walk to this restaurant. And literally in this town where we're at, there's like a McDonald's, this hotel, and this restaurant. There's nothing. And
I know
me and Jeff and Kevin, we eat in this diner. And it's pretty much diner fare. It's about what you would expect, like pork chops and green beans and mashed potatoes and that kind of stuff. And so we all had like the meatloaf dinner or something like this. And Jeff, who at this time was now like really embracing his foodiness, walks out of the diner, and me and Kevin are walking out with him, and he's like, I just got to go get some chicken McNuggets. I got to get something to get this taste out of my mouth. And he just kind of stormed off to McDonald's. And me and Kevin were just like scratching our heads like, I don't know that McNuggets are the answer here. But, it was just this peak sort of character wacky Jeff moment, and we still like, if we eat something that we don't really like, we sort of are like, I got to get this. I need some nuggets. I gotta get this taste out of my mouth, and it's just one of those moments of like, I don't think Jeff realized how funny and dramatic he was being in the moment, and how it sticks. It's definitely one of the funnier things I can remember. And I don't feel like it's a memory that depicts him as being bad or anything like that. It's just such a weird comment to make, and a very honest desire to, I'll do anything to get this out of my mouth. So it was pretty funny.
Ben?
Well, the thing that, I've had time to think about this since everyone else talked first. What keeps popping into my head was, like Adam mentioned earlier, this is kind of coming back to psychedelics and music. We were at High Sierra, and we were playing a late night show, and the late nights were always kind of wild. And certainly Jeff and I don't know about Adam and Dave, we had achieved psychedelic status, and we were playing. Adam was there.
Yeah.
And
I have the VHS tape. I have the whole show. And you cannot tell I'm tripping. I was like really high, and you can't tell.
Wow. I didn't know we had video of it, but so we're on stage, and it's jammed in there. It's just like big energy. And, there's this thing that happens with psychedelics where, or at least like you're on the edge. There's an edge. And you're just like, oh my God. And it's like half the brain's like, okay, we'll just keep it together. Like, keep it together. And there's this other part that's just like, you're just going to start laughing maniacally here at any moment. You know, stress and input, too much input. But along the one wall of this building we were playing in, they had a giant screen. And they had cameras set up, just like, you know, they do now at Red Rocks. You screen on the side of each of the stage. Both two sides of the stage have a screen. You can do close-ups for the people sitting in the back, so you can see what's happening. And modern technology allows that to be in sync, so that the guitar player is playing and his hand is moving, and it's exactly what he's doing live. There's no latency. Well, this was not that. There was maximum latency. And so there's this enormous, however many times life-size screen, and we're being projected on it, and it's right in our line of sight. And I remember Jeff and I looking at each other. And what the thing about, like, you know, any band that plays together for a long time, but certainly Yonder Mountain, and definitely my relationship with Jeff, where there was peak nonverbal communication abilities. You know, musically, I could tell, like, he was going to take a left turn before I knew it. He didn't have to say nothing. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and looking up at this great big screen of us performing that is so out of sync that it was like, you've seen the overdubbed samurai movies and stuff. It was that. And so we're singing like Half Moon Rising, and we're watching ourselves, but we can't watch ourselves because it's going to make us mess up because it's out of sync, but you can't not look at it because it's huge and right there. And it's hilarious, but it's scary. And I just remember having this look like, don't laugh. Like, first, don't laugh because we'll never stop. Like, just keep it together. But I remember it being this, I'll never forget that. I'm amazed that you have the video of it, Adam.
Yeah. And behind us was the old school, like the projector with the little like colored ink things that guys were like swirling to make it look all trippy, like they did.
Liquid lights.
Liquid projections. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. And that's like, so that you can see. You can't see the big screen because it's, you know, shot at the stage. Fareed Hawk sat in with us. I was like, oh my God. I was in my mind, I'm like, I'm so high. Everyone's going to know. And you watch it and I look like I look at any other show. I'm so amazed. Like the way that I felt compared to what was happening. And it didn't even, I was like, oh my God, I screwed that up so bad. It didn't even sound bad. I'm like, well, goes to show you.
What song did Fareed play with us? I think I remember.
We did June Apple and then something else.
Was it Yes You Do, No She Don't?
It may have been a jug band tune, yeah.
I worked with Fareed for a while. What a talent.
Oh, man. So good.
Thanks again, guys. I can't express how much this means to me on a personal level. And I think folks are going to love some of these old stories. And it's very meaningful stuff. And I can feel that through the way you communicate it. And thank you.
Yeah. Thanks,
You're
Justin.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for having us.
There's a house somewhere, I know, where the fires burn all night long. There's a swing outside on the porch where I feel I could rock away the dusk till the dawn. And even though the wind may now be howling, the stars are bright and they push me on and on. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies. There's a cold wind blowing across the great divide, and the stars they guide my way across the night. There's a half moon rising, pushing me on over another mountaintop. Push me on, no I'll never stop. Push me on. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies tonight. Now the shoes on my feet, the soles are broken down, and my coat is tattered and worn, and the hunger in my belly and the fever in my head will vanish at my first glimpse of home. And even though the rain may now be falling, passion is deep, it pushes me on. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies. There's a cold wind blowing across the great divide, and the stars, they guide my way across the night. There's a half moon rising, pushing me on over another mountaintop. Push me on, no, I'll never stop. Push me on. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies tonight. There's a still at dawn, like the sound of your love's breath, as she lies sleeping down below me now in the valley, is the only peace on earth that I ever want to know. And her lips are as soft as I remember. She alone has brought me back on home. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies. There's a cold wind blowing across the great divide, and the stars, they guide my way across the night. There's a half moon rising, pushing me on over another mountaintop. Push me on, no, I'll never stop. Push me on. There's a half moon rising in southeastern skies tonight.
This episode of Galaxy Tenants was brought to you by Music Marauders. Our theme song was co-produced by Naryan Padmanabha and Jay Picard. You can find out information about upcoming releases, tour dates, and more at yondermountain.com.